So I want to start this show by talking about the shift that is happening in the media. Like, hello, can you smell the change? Because things are changing, and that is whether you like it or not. I don't remember what prophet it was, but this is where a season where I was just like all into listening to all the prophets, maybe too much. But anyway, there was someone who prophesied that the mainstream media would sink like the Titanic, and that is exactly what is happening. Where people source their information and basically what outlets people trust for information, that is changing drastically. And so a few things that happened last week gives us some of the greatest indications. The changing of the guards is happening in like real time, okay? And I think this is a good thing, actually. Last week, Joe Rogan interviewed Donald Trump on his podcast. And I mean, let me tell you, that podcast did numbers, okay? Like people were tuned in. And there's people who also complain that Google was shadow banning the interview. People were trying to Google the interview and weren't able to find it. So here you have a presidential candidate on the biggest podcast in the world. And so, of course, everyone's like, well, let's see what the other candidate has to say. Are you going to be on the biggest podcast in the world? Well, Joe Rogan released this statement on X. He says, also, for the record, the Harris campaign has not passed on doing the podcast. Okay, cool. They offered a date for Tuesday, but I would have had to travel to her, and they only wanted to do an hour. I strongly feel the best way to do it is in the studio in Austin. My sincere wish is to just have a nice conversation and get to know her as a human being. I really hope we can make it happen. Do you know what this means? I'm about to tell you. Here we have a podcaster, right? A podcaster. They're going to stick to their terms when interviewing the current vice president who is also running to become president. This is like unheard of. Like, do you understand? Now, the question is, does Joe Rogan need Kamala Harris on his podcast? Or does Kamala Harris need to be on Joe Rogan's podcast? Is it more essential to her campaign, or is it more important for his platform? Y'all, I'm sorry, but I don't think Joe Rogan needs Kamala Harris on his podcast to do his thing. If it was a mainstream journalist, they would have moved heaven and earth to go and interview the sitting vice president, right? I mean, that's what's supposed to happen. That's how it's supposed to go. But guys, we are in a new era. We are in the era of the independent creator, the independent media outlet. That is what's happening. And that's actually good news, because the mainstream media, if you've really been paying attention, has really, really lost the trust of most people. So I was reading some of the responses to Joe Rogan's statement. And so, of course, you had people who were like, well, you should go out of your way. You should move heaven and earth, to go interview the VP, right? Like, she has things to do. And that's totally valid. Like, I completely get that. But as a businesswoman, I understand leverage and recognizing your value and what you need to do and what really benefits you, and also standing your ground regardless of who it is. So, and then there were people like, yeah, she didn't really want to be on the podcast anyway. She gave you terms that you knew you wouldn't agree to. So guys, I don't know. I can't judge motives. But what I can say is I probably would have did what Joe Rogan did, because he understands the position of his platform and the power of his platform. I believe Joe Rogan's decision, and his decision based on his platform and the power of his platform, sends a huge signal as to the state of media and the shift that's happening. Another story I believe that sends a huge signal to what is happening, the shift that is happening in media, is the LA Times and the Washington Post deciding not to endorse a candidate. Now, that is wild. And I'm going to tell you my thoughts on it, right? So typically, both of those platforms endorse the Democratic nominee. However, this year round, this season, they're like, yeah, we just gonna be over here. And the thing is, especially Washington Post is like mad biased, straight up. Okay, the liberals were having a super fit. They were like, oh well, if you didn't want to uphold your responsibility, you should have just, you don't know your responsibility as a newspaper. And they not obligated to do nothing. But you know, when you a socialist, you just think that private company is supposed to do whatever you want them to do. It don't work like that. The Washington Post is not owned by the government. At least I hope not. So Jeff Bezos, y'all, he stood his ground, and I applaud him for that. Business owners should stand their ground. So he stood his ground and he said this. So this is according to CBS News. Jeff Bezos on Monday defended the Washington Post decision not to endorse a presidential candidate as principled, with the billionaire founder of Amazon.com arguing Americans believe the media is biased. Yes, we do. Excuse me. The mainstream media is biased. Bezos, who bought the newspaper in 2013, also pushed back against any notion that he ordered it up to protect his business interests. On Friday, the Washington Post publisher William Lewis said the newspaper would not endorse a presidential candidate in this year's election or in future elections, a stance that sparked outrage from some of its current and former employees as well as subscribers. So reportedly, they lost like thousands of subscribers because of this decision. Now, here's what I think. I think that Jeff Bezos, being like a super smart businessman, saw the writing on the wall, right? I mean, he sees the mainstream media Titanic sinking and he ain't trying to go down with it. These businessmen, they analyze data. They pay attention to what's going on. They try to stay ahead of the curve. You know, if at least half of this nation supports one candidate, and I think it's more than half, and they already don't trust the mainstream media, and you're already being accused of being biased, then why would you add another nail in your coffin by choosing the candidate that y'all all know is not as popular as the mainstream media says? You see, he says it's not about his protecting his business interests. But listen, if it is, that makes him smart. And so, no, they are not obligated to choose a candidate or endorse a candidate. The craziness of liberals expecting these business owners to do what they tell them, like, y'all are giving bully. Matter of fact, y'all are giving dictator. Y'all are giving communist. Speaking of dictators and the mainstream media having a whole fit and losing the trust of the American people, Trump's rally in New York City, which by the way was a huge success, a monumental moment, which the media tried to frame as a Nazi rally. And then they wonder why people don't trust them. Because, like, really? I saw people lined up to get into Madison Square Garden from 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, I was on TikTok. Don't ask me what I was doing on TikTok Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. I was just browsing. I was on TikTok 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, and I saw like crowds of people outside of Madison Square Garden. So I'm like, look, love to be at this rally, but I don't think I want to do that on a Sunday. I'm going to church and then I'm coming home to cook. We actually went out to eat and I was grateful. Praise the Lord. So me and my husband, we watched the rally on TV, and definitely it was a moment in history, except for that comedian guy. Like, dude, I understand you were trying to make a statement about, like, you know, Republicans being, you know, the ones who can take a joke, but we can't take no chances of letting the real communists get into office. Okay, so next time, all right, just be a little more careful. Which, by the way, Trump should totally in my opinion, apologize for the Puerto Rico thing, because it was in poor taste. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in the Bronx and I know mad Puerto Ricans, okay? But I do think it will be a good move for him to, even though he was not the one that said it, but I do think it would be good for him to apologize just because it happened at his rally. I think it would be good for the American people. And if not, hey, they want to see Trump be more presidential. And I'm just like, and on the other hand, I'm just like, but everybody that y'all saw act presidential and tell you exactly what you want to hear did nothing but destroy the economy. So the media decided to run with this story. Oh my gosh, he had a Nazi rally at the Madison Square Garden, comparing it to an actual Nazi rally that happened in like 1938 or something. Craziness. Just absolute like... But let's talk about the real communists. So I was thinking about this the other day, right? Like I had my awakening about what is really happening in America in 2020, right? And so God led me to go into this deep dive into understanding what socialism and communism is and what social justice really means and what it's all about. Now, me being Black, I thought social justice was about helping Black people, but it's about wealth redistribution. So I'm learning all of these things, right? Because I mean, they're not going to teach it to you in school because they run the schools. So I'm learning all these things and I'm like, wait a minute. Why on earth was Jay-Z walking around wearing Che Guevara shirts? What was that all about? Does he know who Che Guevara is? Do you know who Che Guevara is? Let's watch.
Nobody actually lived it. That's when I see like Kaepernick. He went to Miami and had a Che Guevara shirt. Like this dude slaughtered thousands of people, family of mine, friends of my family, and just to take power. This guy was so that he had the wall removed from his own office so he could see the firing squad eliminating people. And these are the people he put on t-shirts. And if you believe in them so much, like any of these guys that advocate for socialism or communism, go live over there, dog. Go just 1 year. I dare you, bro. I dare you, bro, because you wouldn't make it one day over there, Kaepernick or any of these advocating for socialism, communism, you know. And what I was saying earlier is that look all over the world, Venezuela, Brazil, Colombia, Ukraine, it's like gotten bad overnight. And what used to be like the standard of fighting communism, socialism, is now like somewhat semi-adapted in this country, you know. Progressive socialism, or what do they call it?
The symbol of rebellion actually enforced conformity. So if protesters tried this in Cuba, Che wouldn't be marching with them. His men would be imprisoning them and perhaps murdering them.
And he ordered the execution of many people with no trial.
Che also served as Castro's chief executioner, presiding over the infamous La Cabaña prison.
He said, the detainee, you first kill him and then you judge him. That is very scary, you know. That's why he was called El Carnicero de la Cabaña, the butcher of La Cabaña fortress.
So maybe it's not such a great idea to wiggle your toddler into a onesie with the butcher of La Cabaña's mug on it. Che is so iconic, but few recognize these faces, just some of the many victims of Che and his firing squad.
So for Jay-Z to be walking around in a Che Guevara shirt is like, dude was a murderer. What are you trying to say? And what is Hollywood's obsession with Che Guevara? Why is this man celebrated?
Before there was Oprah, Bono, or Madonna, there was Che. Che's the celebrity that celebrities adore. That's him on Johnny Depp's neck. And Che is just about all Gisele Bundchen is wearing. Che burst onto the scene a half-century ago as an idealistic revolutionary who helped found communist Cuba. Today, his rebellious image is used to sell countless products: beer, flasks, belt buckles, lighters, fast food.
Viva Gordita!
The best-known Che product is the T-shirt. The Che shirts are so popular that you can buy a T-shirt with the famous T-shirt on it. Go to most any kind of protest and you're bound to see Che. And from hip-hop to rock to pop, musicians really dig Che. But is this a case of unrequited love?
He hates artists. So how is it possible that artists still today support the image of Che Guevara?
Say most of the prominent Black leaders, actors, entertainers, athletes throughout Black American history were Marxists. If you don't know what that is, they were socialists. They were communist leaning. Like, I want Black people especially to get this. We celebrate, we honor people who are socialists, people who have generated wealth as capitalists through a capitalist system. Tell me and you to be socialist. They worked the market. They worked and benefited from the free market. And their message to us is to support the expansion and the control of government. And we just ate it up because we thought the revolution was going to bring equality. Yeah, it's going to bring equality. It's going to make everybody equally broke. And some people are like, but what about Sweden? And they list all of these foreign countries. Research what the tax rate is. Anytime you hear someone noting a European country that has socialist policies and, oh, you know, everyone has free this and free that, let me tell you, the tax rate be like 50% or higher. Imagine now you get your check. Let's say your check is $1,000 and you got to give half of that to the government. Black Lives Matter said capitalism doesn't love Black people. It's a system. It don't love anybody, but it works for whoever works it. Another set of Marxists who benefit from the free market and tell you to be a socialist. We never needed the government to make a way for us. We needed the government to move out of the way for us. Listen, if you haven't gotten a copy already, check out my book, Essays of a Young Melanated Christian Conservative Woman, where I talk about how we've been manipulated and convinced to embracing socialism to our own detriment. See the link in the description and get your copy today. So the elections are coming up, right? Like, not like you need me to tell you, but if you're in New York State, I encourage you to do your research about Prop 1. But here's a video so you can see some of the things that are truly behind this decision.
The New York legislature adopted abortion rights in 1970, 54 years ago. And there's no credible argument to suggest that those rights are in jeopardy at all. This is a cynical maneuver to try to boost turnout based on a false premise that abortion is at risk. In actuality, this amendment, though, does much more than that. It would, for instance, give a minor the right to so-called gender-affirming care, puberty blockers, even surgeries, without permission, without consent of their parents. This is unheard of in New York. You can't go into a tanning parlor in New York under 18 without your parents' permission, or have a nurse give you a Tylenol in school without parental permission. And yet this amendment would open the door to a radical gender ideology, which would facilitate the complete overriding of parental rights.
Amendment would undermine religious liberties, parental rights, and girls-only sports. That last one, faith leaders say they have verified Prop 1 could mandate New York schools to allow biological boys on girls' sports teams, emphasizing that would, quote, rip away safe spaces and places women can thrive. Opposers also noted vague language in Prop 1.
For our women and for our religious institutions, and the overarching issue that we're seeing today is within the proposed changes that they're asking us to vote for on this constitutional amendment are vague. There's no definitions on some of the categories, and we all want equal rights for everyone, but in the end, when we have a constitutional amendment, it should be clear and succinct.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, subscribe, like, share, and I will see you next time. But wait, before I go, to sign up for the Glory Report newsletter, the link is in the description. So if you want to stay in touch, if you want to know the latest, if you want access to exclusive events and things that I have coming up, I encourage you to sign up at the link in the description. Until next time.